Bismillah ar-Rahman rahim. So today we have a very important lecture on nitrogen cycling. So nowadays it is a very hard issue worldwide because the nitrous oxide gas emissions, they are contributing greatly to global warming and affecting the climate. And there are also a few international engagement like the resolution from the United Nations to reduce the nitrogen use and to reduce the nitrogen emissions and especially the losses of nitrogen from the system. Considering agriculture and all other aspects. So we will discuss here that which are the basically cascades of nitrogen. So we'll talk about the cascade, which we have biological nitrogen fixation, then we have industrial N fixation as a fertilizer. So we have high combustion N emissions from traffic. We have a nitrogen cycle in agriculture system. And then finally, we will talk about N balance sheet in agriculture system. Starting with the fertilizer, which is industrial fixation, and we know that this is intended flow because we are adding purposefully nitrogen fertilizer to the crops to produce more food for the population. So this shows the blue color will always show the intended flow. So this is intended flow that we are adding fertilizer to the crops, and there are unintended flows like these orange color shows the unintended flow. It means whatever we are adding here, the some of the fertilizer will be leached on in the form of nitrate, some will be losses as ammonia, some will be losses as nitrogen oxides, and some will be lost as a nitrous oxide gas. And then the other intended flow, that the crop which we are harvesting, they will be utilized by the people, by the livestock, uh, chickens. So, and then that will again come in the form of manure come to the soil, which is also intended flow because we want to make our soil more healthy. But again, from here, from livestock management and from human waste, so we have again the similar emissions like nitrous oxide, nitrogen oxides, ammonia, and leached nitrogen. So it means that there is the first step from where we are wasting nitrogen, and then there is the next step. And then we have also some recycling. For example, the ammonia or the nitrogen oxide which are being released in the atmosphere, so they can come into the ecosystem through rain. So that is kind of the wet deposition. And then from here they can again be leached down or will be runoff through runoff to the streams. And from streams, again, there may be some nitrous oxide gas emission, nitrogen oxide emissions. Directly from this, the natural biodiversity and from the streams and from the coastal seas, so again, there is the emission of nitrogen. And eventually, there are also a kind of denitrification from the whole system. So it means the nitrogen is again being contributed to being directed toward atmosphere in the form of molecule nitrogen, which is of course not a reactive nitrogen. This is the same nitrogen which we have already have in the atmosphere. All these are the greenhouse gas balance. This will affect the stratospheric ozone loss, tropospheric, and then the particulate matter. So then we have a terrestrial eutrophication, and then we have freshwater eutrophication, marine eutrophication, soil acidification. So all these are becoming polluted So whatever we are adding here, the nitrogen which we are adding here in the form of fertilizer, so that is contributing, of course, to food production and rearing of animals and humans, but they are also polluting at different stages and at different extent. So this is the issue because the in the fertilizer we are converting N2, which is not a reactive nitrogen, into reactive nitrogen, and this contributes overall to almost 63% of the reactive nitrogen into the atmosphere. So this was the first source of nitrogen, of our first source of reactive nitrogen. And then we have another which is the biological nitrogen fixation. And of course, this is also a intended flow because we need nitrogen through our plants for plant production. And when again, we have again the similar unintended flow. So unintended flow is always similar to the pollution. So which is lost, which is not, because we are adding to get yield. But if it's not converted or translated to yields, it is being lost somewhere. So that is unintended. And again, you can see the same, everything is same, whatever we are getting from the biological nitrogen fixation. And then this contributes to 24% of reactive nitrogen. And then we have the third one, which is from the combustion. You can see here that that contribute to the 13% of an NR, reactive nitrogen production. And you can see that there is no intended flow because we are not purposefully releasing nitrogen. We don't have any use of that, what is being released from the traffic or the energy production, combustion. So all of that is unintended, and that is polluting the soil, and ultimately all the ecosystem is affected by that. And if we just get it together, so we have a very beautiful picture of the nitrogen cascade in a very simple way. And that slide was taken from Professor Mark Sutton from UK. He presented 1 or 2 years back in a forum to show off the nitrogen cascades in the simple way. So looking at the overall nitrogen distribution, which is very interesting to see that whatever we are talking at, what is the real status of the nitrogen in the atmospheric system. So we have a 99.3840% nitrogen in the atmosphere. So our atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, and the overall nitrogen in the system, so that is 99.3840%. And then we have a 0.6% in the seas, and then we have a 0.0038% in the soil. And then we have plants which are having 0.00038%. We have microbes contribution, we have animals contribution, and of course we have a human contribution, which is very less. But of course it contributes to the overall nitrogen in the system. So it means the most of the nitrogen is present in the atmosphere, and most of that nitrogen is in the form of N2, which is non-reactive. And basically, that is the major reservoir of the nitrogen, and all the nitrogen is coming from this source towards the other sources. For example, if we are fixing through industry or biological nitrogen fixation, or through traffic, all that is coming from this major reservoir, and it means the N2 from this reservoir is being converted to NR, which is causing issues. In this scenario, which I have presented here, the N contains in mineral rocks, which is 180 multiplied by 1015 metric ton is not included. So we have also some rocks and minerals. So we included the soil, especially the agriculture soil, the upper layer, but the other rocks we haven't included because that has very less to do with overall the distribution of nitrogen. The sources of nitrogen, I mean, of course, the molecular nitrogen, which we have in 99 plus% in the atmosphere. We have a volatile nitrogen in the form of ammonia and nitrogen oxide and nitrous oxide. We have minerals, that is nitrate and ammonium. We have organic in the form of amino acids and peptides. Urea is also organic nitrogen. Plants can almost use all form of nitrogen except N2. So this N2 cannot be utilized by the plants. So basically, everything is being done, and that is the conversion of N2 into the form which can be utilized by the crop plants. So utilization is determined strongly by the environmental factors and soil conditions. So these if affect the utility of sources which we have. So organic nitrogen is also utilized by a few plant species in a very small amounts. So the major utilization is through mineral, which is nitrate and ammonium. Nitrogen has significance, of course, in agriculture. It is the fourth most important nutrient for plants, that is after carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And it is the first mineral element which is the most important for the crop production. Quantitatively, N is the most important nutrient regarding plant growth and productivity. And the nitrogen content in the plant is varies from 2 to 5%. So it means it is required in major amounts. And the potassium is also required in major quantity, but the differentiation is that the potassium is mostly the part of soil structure, and we have a reservoir of potassium in the soil. But in case of nitrogen, so we have almost deficiency all over the world, and we have to add nitrogen fertilizer to the soil for best crop production. So as we increase the nitrogen supply, we increase the vegetative growth, and of course, ultimately the yield production. But there are also some limitation for nitrogen in the plant growth. You have, to a certain extent, you can enhance the yield, but after that there is a decline. It means the excess of nitrogen can show the toxicity on the plant's health. But if we look at the economics or the output, relative output, so at this stage we may have a more profitability on economic production as compared to the highest, because the increment which we are getting here for the specified nitrogen application, so that is very less. Increment mean the increment to the growth of the plant. So if we are adding a fertilizer of $100, so we may not be getting $100 back. So it means that is a negative, and that is not the optimum level for crop production. So this may be the optimum level for crop production. What is the role of nitrogen if it's in excess? Because it may be in excess if you are adding a lot of fertilizer. It can delay the senescence. It can increase the growth, of course. The vegetative growth will be increased. The dry matter production will be more. Of course, that I mentioned earlier, so that may not be economical, but there is that the excess nitrogen can produce more biomass than the leaf. Enhances the leaf length and area, but reduces the leaf thickness, which can cause which can attract the pests to attack on the leaves and enhance the disease attacks. And then shoot root ratio, so that enhances, and the roots are less. It means there are more chances of lodging because the strength is less. for the plants. Then, especially in the cereal, there is elongation in the stem. If we add more nitrogen fertilizer, which will cause the lodging. Mineral nitrogen, if we are supplying less, means the optimal nitrogen supply, so there will be growth retardation, reduce the yield, enhance the senescence, and the leaf chlorosis, which is the very typical symptom of nitrogen deficiency you can see. So it will enhance the senescence, because when you are adding less nitrogen fertilizer, the plants has general behavior uh, to move toward the maturity, and then the senescence will be earlier. So looking at the dynamics which we are using, the synthetic nitrogen worldwide, so that is about 49% of total 235 metric tons, million tons. And then we have a contribution from animal manure, which is 30%. Then we have contribution from crop residues, and which then we have 8% from biological nitrogen fixation. So it means the major contribution is coming through synthetic, which is through the industrial fixation. And then the utility of nitrogen by different countries. So we can observe here that two countries, China and India, so they are the major utilizer of nitrogen. So of course they have more population to feed, so they are using a lot of nitrogen. The 30% is utilized by China, and the 31% of total nitrogen is utilized by India. And then we have a 15% in Indonesia, then we have 11% in USA. In Pakistan, we have only 3% of the total nitrogen used by world. So it means so whenever we talk about the pollution or the nitrogen management, of course, these two countries are very important. And so recently we are working in South Asia, and so that's why the India has more importance because they are the major utilizer of nitrogen. Distribution of N fixation and synthetic N fertilizers. So we can observe from here. So this shows the biological nitrogen fixation, 0 to 10%, 10 to 20%, and we can see here that we are in the range of 0 to 10%. And but if we look at the synthetic, we are at very higher level. So you can see we are at the 50 to 75% synthetic fertilizer. So it means we are among the major user of the synthetic fertilizer. But if you look at the other countries, some other countries which have a less synthetic fertilizer and more biological nitrogen fixation, this is mainly because they might have some forest areas, and they have some natural vegetation, so which is, and they're not using synthetic fertilizer to produce greenery. So looking at the nitrogen cycle, if we just comprehend from agriculture point of view, as we have to manage the soil. So we must know that what are the cascades in the agriculture nitrogen cycle system. So we know that we are adding the fertilizers in the form of chemical fertilizers, then in the form of litter. So there is a modification process, then there is a nitrification, denitrification, and there are some losses in the form of leaching, and then we have also losses in the form of emissions, so gases emissions like denitrification, nitrous oxide, or N2 to the atmosphere. Then again, it is fixed by the industrial fixation or biological fixation. So we have also animal feces, anthropogenic nitrogen inputs, which we are adding to the fertilizer. So we have a whole story here. So we will discuss different processes in next slides to sum up with the uh, nitrogen balance. So first talking about the mineralization, because when we are adding litter or organic means we to the soil, so that will be mineralized because and mostly the plant they cannot utilize the organic nitrogen. So the nitrogen mineralization is the process by which organic N is converted to plant available inorganic forms. Soils regularly amended with organic waste will accumulate organic N until they reach a steady state condition. So this is a very useful concept for nitrogen management, because when we are adding an organic waste to the soil, so there will be accumulation in the soil. The organic N will remain in the soil unless we get the steady state condition. So what is this steady state condition? Basically, the amount of manure or organic N added in a given year will approximately equal to the amount of mineralized. It means whatever you have added, all is mineralized, all is converted from organic to inorganic to be utilized by the microbes or by the plants. So that is basically steady state condition. So this is very clear. If we are adding manure to the soil and it is all is mineralized to the inorganics, and we will not have any accumulation of organic N in the soil. So this is basically ideal condition, but it is not happening like this. This is the equation which can tell us about the time or the staying time or resident time of the organic nitrogen into the soil, because that depend on the rate of that specific organic matter which we are adding, and of course the time period, and that will give us the real value of an N mineralized. But we have also some soil impact on and climatic impact on the mineralization. Organic N is added periodically rather than continuously. So the organic nitrogen is also not being added continuously. So periodically we are adding, and the soil organic N stores respond by increasing with addition. If when we are adding the manure, so there will be some stores of organic nitrogen in the soil, but when there is a mineralization, so then of course the nitrogen will be the stores will be decreased. Then we have a nitrogen mineralization. The process that starts with the aminization, because mostly we have nitrogen in the form of protein, and the proteins they are converted to amino acids. So this process is called aminization, and whole this process is being activated or stimulated or being processed through the microorganisms. The proteins they are converted to amino acids, and then these amino acids they are being converted to ammonium. So which process is called ammonification. It means the proteins amino acids, so they are being converted to uh, ammonium ions. So that is ammonification, conversion of amino acids and other N containing compounds into ammonium form of nitrogen. So what is the fate of that ammonium which we have in the soil? So that can be taken up by the plants, of course, or by the microorganisms. That can be lost as a ammonia gas through volatilization. Then there is also some adsorption to the exchange complex. The ammonium can be adsorbed to the exchange complex because we have a negative charge on the soil particles. And the sum will also be fixed in the 2 to 1 type clay minerals. It is just like the potassium fixation, and ammonium has also ability to be fixed to these soils if they have some sites there. There is another fate of ammonium, which is that it can also be nitrified. So what is this nitrification? The process in which nitrifying bacteria convert ammonium into nitrate, because the ammonium present in the soil can be converted into nitrate. Of course, that process is also through the microorganism, the nitrosomonas. They will convert ammonium into the nitrite, and then nitrite will be converted into the nitrobacter. And this process should be simultaneously, because a nitrite is generally it's toxic when it stay more in the soil. So if we don't have a nitrobacter there and we have only nitrosomonas, so then there will be accumulation of nitrite, which is toxic. So it means we must have the both type of microorganism in the soil in the nitrification process. So what is the fate of this nitrate which we produced here? So that can also be taken up by the plants as well as by the microbe. So that can also be leached down in the form of nitrate. We have also seen in the cycle. And there is also denitrification under anaerobic condition. If we don't have aeration, proper aeration, the nitrate will be denitrified into nitric oxide and other nitrogen species into the atmosphere. The factor, of course, the amount of ammonium will affect the nitrification, and then the number of nitrifying bacteria, of course. So the population of these microorganisms, then soil aeration. If we don't have aeration, so that will also slow down the process. Soil moisture, because the microorganisms, they need that. Then soil pH, the optimum pH, that is 5.5 to 8. So that these are the factors which affect the nitrification. And now we have this third, which is the next process, which is denitrification, that how nitrate is being denitrified to the atmospheric gases. Sorry, we just missed that. The temperature, of course, the soil temperature, of course, that will affect the nitrification process. So the optimum temperature is 25 to 35. If we have a more or less, so that will reduce the nitrification ability. A microbially facilitated process of dissimilatory nitrate reduction that may ultimately produce N2. So that is basically the denitrification process. So we have a conversion of nitrate to nitrite, and then nitrite to nitric oxide, and then nitrous oxide, and then N2. So these are basically nitrous oxide and N2. These are the gases which are released to the atmosphere. And of course, a whole this process is also a condition with the microorganisms which are involved, especially those are more tolerant to anaerobic conditions, because the anaerobic conditions are generally producing more nitric oxide and nitrogen gas emission into the atmosphere. For optimal denitrification, high water saturation of percentage, saturation of soils, 70 to 80% water. It means anaerobic condition, impaired soil aeration, optimum temperature 5 to 75. It has a very wide range of temperature. So it means if we have a impaired soil aeration due to saturation, so there are great chances of very high denitrification. Then optimum pH 6 to 8, and high soil nitrate, because they are, of course, the basic element which will affect the denitrification. If we have less nitrate, of course, there will be less denitrification. Another cascade are the process which is involved in the nitrogen cycle, that is the volatilization of ammonium in the form of ammonia gas. At high pH soils, high temperature and low binding capacity of soil, it means the soil have less clay content, and high pH, so it means these are the favorable conditions. The livestock has plenty supply of urea, so that is also a source of ammonia volatilization. You can see here that when we are adding urea to the soil, so the urease enzyme will convert it into ammonia, and ammonia can be easily volatilized. So that's why we are generally for soil quality management, we recommend not to add urea in high temperatures. So it's recommended to put it urea in the evening time when you have less temperature. And at high pH soil, especially our soil, we must be more careful for that, because we have also high temperature and we have more pH of the soil. So there are very great chances of fertilization when we add urea to the soil. So we have produced nitrate through mineralization, through the nitrification process, or through the ammonification process, or we are adding nitrogen from the industrial fixation in the form of nitrate and ammonium. So that can also be immobilized. Basically, it is a reverse of mineralization, because the living organism present in the soil, uh, whether they are plants or they are microbes, they will try to get mineral nitrogen. And if we have a microorganism in the soil, so of course they will compete with the plants to take up nitrogen. And that nitrogen will become the part of those microbes or plants. And of course they are organic, and that is immobilized form. And the plant cannot take up directly that organic nitrogen. But of course, we know that in mineralization, all the organic nitrogen can be mineralized to inorganic form, and then it can be taken up by the plants. So we have a biological nitrogen fixation. Uh, we know that the leguminous crops, they can make nodules in the roots, and the nodules are basically the host of the rhizobia, and they can fix nitrogen. They have ability to break the bond of triple bond of nitrogen through nitrogenase and azotrophs, which will convert that into the ammonia gas, and then the ammonium form, and the ammonium can be taken up by the plants through the internal uptake system, or through from the preface of rhizobia and the plant roots. So this has also very good contribution to the agriculture soils. We have different kinds of biological nitrogen fixation. One is the symbiotic, in which the rhizobia that has association with the plant roots, and these are basically the high nitrogen fixing microbes. In alfalfa, so they can fix 100 kilogram per acre per year. In soybeans, 50 kg per acre per year. In beans, 20 kg per acre per year. So they can contribute a lot of nitrogen to the soil. So you look at the alfalfa, the 100 kg per acre per year. So it means if you have a alfalfa in the field, so you are adding a great amount of nitrogen to the soil. And then we have also non-symbiotic microorganisms like bacteria, actinomycete, blue green algae. So they can also fix 2 to 25 kilogram per acre per year. So that is also a good source of nitrogen from atmosphere to the soil. So look, just summing up the gains, the biological nitrogen fixation, then the industrial fixation as fertilizer, crop residues, manures. So electric discharge, so that is also the lightning that also contribute to a certain extent. I think it's almost 2 kilogram per kg, 2 kilogram kg per acre per year, 2 kilogram per acre per year. But it depends, of course, how much lighting is happening. So it's, of course, it's a minor amount when you talk about per acre, but overall contribution of lighting can be significant. Combustion of fossils, so they are also so gains which we are uh, uh, adding. Then we have losses, the crop removal, the nitrogen being taken up by the plants that has been removed in the crop in the form of yield or fodder, leaching. Then we have volatilization, denitrification, and ammonium fixation at clay minerals. So these are basically losses. Ammonium fixation is also a loss. It can be released later on, but it is a loss for the time being. Then we have also a cycling, that is the mineralization and immobilization and the nitrification. Uh, the these basically change one farm into the other. So this is not basically the loss, because the mineralization from organic to inorganic, then immobilization from organic, from inorganic to organic, and again that can be converted to inorganic. Nitrification is from ammonium to nitrate. So these processes are basically responsible for the cycling of different nitrogen forms in the soil. So these are the three basic part of this nitrogen balance sheet, which we have especially in the uh, balance sheet. So combustion of fossil, I think I could not explain well. Combustion, basically, this is a contribution when we are releasing the nitrogen from the combustion from the traffic. I have explained in the first earlier slides that they are releasing nitrogenous gases to the atmosphere, and those nitrogenous gases can be directed towards soil through wet deposition. So, if we have a nitrogenous gases in the atmosphere, that can be, along with the rain, that can be again come into the soil. So that is also addition to the soil. So nitrogen is very important. We can see here that the plants, they can only take the mineral nitrogen, and the animals and humans, they cannot utilize mineral nitrogen. So they must utilize the organic form. And because the nitrogen is a part of proteins, which is a major nutrient for the human and animal nutrition. So we cannot use mineral inorganic nitrogen, but we can use only organic source, and this organic source is plants, both for animals and humans. So why is nitrogen such an important nutrient? Because only plants are able to convert inorganic nitrogen in organic amino acids essential for animals and humans. So just summing up today's lecture, the work being done on the nitrogen and land atmosphere exchange. So there are 4 groups which are working on that. The one group is working on ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and nitric oxide. So they are working on, they are relevant to these 3 the sources. And then we have a nitric acid, aerosols, and ammonia volatilization. So the one group, so that is which is interrelated. So they are working on this aspect. Then we have greenhouse gases, The people, they are working on carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. The nitrogen is of course there. And then we have one group which is working on the wet deposition. As I earlier mentioned, the combustion, the source nitrogen is again deposited to the soil through this wet deposition. Then of course the particulate organic nitrogen, and then the volatile organic nitrogen. So they have a relationship to each other. So these are the four groups which are working for nitrogen research. So that was all about today's lecture. I hope it will enhance your understanding about the nitrogen cycling and nitrogen cascades for better for better agriculture management as well as for better environmental management. So thank you very much.